My opinion with the urgency stuff too, and I'd be curious your thoughts, is Nebraska's always had urgency anyway. They've always wanted to win and everything else. But like in this era where we're approaching rev share, and now we've been in an era for a couple of years where teams are throwing money at players and bringing them in. Like it seems like it's more attainable for more teams. Like the path to success is out there. Like you don't have to have tradition as much. You don't even have to have great facilities or location. If you can pay some of these guys, especially in basketball, to come in and be the dude for a year or two or more, like you're seeing success stories all over the place. So why not Nebraska? I think that's maybe where some of that frustration is coming from, is you're seeing teams leverage finances. Nebraska, I don't know what their NIL situation is specifically, but there's no reason they can't compete for these guys with a lot of other teams. So I think that's where some of that frustration is too, is you're seeing teams in football, teams in basketball build their rosters in a different way, in a way that might actually benefit Nebraska, and it just hasn't happened. And so I think there's some frustration there too that why haven't they been able to get in on this when some other teams seemingly have gotten it going?
Can't
You know
argue
what I
with any
mean?
of that. Can't
You know what
argue
I
with
mean?
that, man.
Like, why can't Nebraska football have a year like Indiana just did? That kind of thing. Like,
They
you're
can.
seeing more teams do it,
Yeah,
and I
they
think
can.
that's where some of that frustration comes in.
They can do it.
Sure, they can.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of conversation over the next many years about what Indiana did. I don't think Indiana is going to replicate that success. I think they might go 7-5. I don't think they're going to go 11-1 in the regular season again. There's going to be a lot of conversations about how Indiana did that, the schedule, et cetera, et cetera. I think Nebraska can relative to its schedule do those things. Like I think Nebraska is capable of going 10-2 next year. Not saying they're going to do it, but are they capable? I think so. And I've spent a lot of time, as well as you, thinking about this roster. And we know this roster at this point. I think it's somewhat of a Frost rule roster, but it's much more rule. And I think we all know what he's about and we all know his culture. And I have a pretty good idea of what I think is going to go to the table. So now it's just going to be, the little details. Well, special teams, which Eckler is in charge of handling, and then the little details around it, like relative to the teams they're playing. So like Michigan's going to come in here, and whoever their head coach is that day is they are going to come in. They're going to look at Nebraska's front, and they're going to be like, "We shall put a second tight end on the field, and we shall try to maul you and hold the ball for 39 minutes, and we will run our quarterback because he can run, and we will try to muscle you and beat you 20-13, and Nebraska's got to have a plan for that. Michigan State will come in, and Michigan State will run a great offense. Jonathan Smith's system, sort of a Ram style system, is terrific. They have great offense. They'll come in and they will run their stuff, and Nebraska's got to stop it. And they're going to do some stuff on defense. And will it work? I don't know. Um, and Michigan State has athletes. They do. So, like all those things, there's USC is going to come in and they're going to try to do to Nebraska what they did last year, only with better players. So, like Nebraska's going to have to do it relative to the competition. If they were playing the Big 12 schedule, they had Scott Frost's schedule at UCF. I'd dial up 10-2 and not hesitate. But they don't have that schedule. They have a bunch of butt kickers on their schedule. So
Yeah. Well, we
they
talk
just
about
do.
it's
What's
like
that?
it's like the NFL, where every week there are so many games that are going to come down to the last possession. We saw that a ton with Nebraska last year. I think we're going to see it a ton with Nebraska this year. And
Right.
so if the playing field is leveled because of all these things going on around college athletics, then it comes down to the margins and finding those little areas. So like, does year two Dylan Raiola make up for some of the margin they didn't have last year? Does Mike Eckler, special teams coordinator, make up for a little bit of that? Does more exotic third down pressures from John Butler make up for that because, as we saw, there were 5 times last year where Nebraska had the ball with a chance to drive and win the game, and they didn't win any of them. And how much could that have swung the season? So like that's the conversation that's interesting to me
Sure.
is the detailed stuff. Like
Yeah.
in what minor ways can they improve? Sort of like what Matt Rule often says, getting 1% better. If Nebraska got 1% better in its infrastructure through coaching and experience or talent upgrade, what can that look like in a season and a schedule when teams are so even and it comes down to just one thing here or there?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything you said is great. I just, my natural tendency is to critique.
Go.
You're absolutely right about some of those one score games, like the Illinois game. They should have won the game.
Hmm.
The Iowa game, you know, I was so sick after that game, and it was such a long season. And it was, you know what I'm talking about. It was a
Oh yeah,
long year. The bye week wasn't quiet. It was Holgerson, and it was a long, long year. And we felt the length of the year. I was so sick and it had been such a long year that we really didn't reflect on how that game ended. Like it was not good. So, um, but they lost that game and they shouldn't have lost. Ohio State was a legit final drive of the game. You lost to a better team. You didn't make plays. The USC and UCLA games were lost in the first half or the third quarter. Stuff that Nebraska could have done to change the trajectory of those games that they didn't.
sure.
And so much of what I say that to say this. I think what they're going to get with Butler and Eckler, and they're not no one's a perfect coach. I think the thing they're going to get is play after play after play after play urgency. And under Tony White, Nebraska was incredible at quick change, responding to adversity. Incredible. You They weren't always great on 3rd and 6 on the opening drive of a game. And I
Mhm.
think what you now it may not work, but I think with Butler and Epler, you're going to get every play is the last play of the game, just like just a certain urgency to it. Now that can backfire on you because you can have busts and guys can try too hard and it can go the wrong way on you. But I think you're going to get that. On the flip side of the coin, I think the offense is going to be more efficient, and we've talked about it. The spine will be less inflamed. They will get the ball out of his hands. They will they'll move the chains. They'll feel good about themselves. They may not score 50 points a game, but they'll try to get a goal. It just becomes a question of whether the edges around the margins, and then does Nebraska play with manic urgency from the very beginning of the game in every snap. I felt like in year one they did more often than they did in year two. The year two team was better. Probably shouldn't have been. Nebraska found unique and insane ways to mismanage the Minnesota and Maryland games in year one. They did.
Mhm.
They should not have lost the games. Those are things that, on rule. They're on rule. The dumb pass, the end of the first half in Minnesota, not challenged. I don't know what happened with the Gabe Irvin play, and then against Maryland, run zone for a ball, and you probably win that game. But Rule also infused them with an urgency that they hadn't had since Bo was there. They hadn't had it. I mean, so he did something that they hadn't had for a decade. And then last year, I thought, in some ways, there may be one or two games they should have won. It's definitely the Illinois game, but that was kind of a 7-5 or 8-14. And I think
Yeah.
this team could be better. I think this team can be a better team than the team they had last year, including on defense, because I think they're gonna play with their hair on fire, and there's a risk to that. You're gonna bust at times, but I thought last year Nebraska didn't have enough of that, and then on offense it was trying to make one big play after another and didn't work. So what's interesting is that if this playoff expands to 16 teams, which could happen right away in theory, it almost puts more pressure on every team that's not in the top little group there to make the playoff, even though because the access is improved.
Hmm.
And it's almost like, if you were to say tomorrow, an Ivy League school said, we are going to admit quadruple the number of undergrads that we did the year before. And the kids who really want to go to an Ivy League school would feel more hope, but also more frustration if they didn't get admitted.
Right.
And that's kind of where Nebraska is going to be. If this thing gets to 16 teams and the Big Ten's got 4 auto bids, and one of the auto bids is you get to be a number 6 seed playing a number 3 seed on the Big Ten championship weekend. If you tell somebody all you got to do is finish 6th in this league, you got to finish in the top third of the 18-team league. Brett Bielema and Kirk Ferentz and certainly Signetti and PJ Fleck, they're all looking around going, we could do that. And then
Well,
at
once
least
again,
you're
it's
in,
like the
you're in it.
NFL. It's
Yep.
like the NFL. Once again, you're judged on playoff appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, if you make enough playoff appearances, you're judged on how deeply you go. And if you keep going deep, then you're judged on how many championships you win. So that's what it's moving toward.
Mm-hmm.
It's moving. Can you make the playoff? Okay, you've made, and then you're in the James Franklin conversation. Well, how deep can you go? How, can you win it? Like that's what it's becoming. And we're moving out of that era where you can win 9 games and go to a nice bowl and never really contend for the top level, but be stable. So like Iowa's a great example. Like Iowa forever has been a stable, good program. They've never really challenged for a championship. But so like if the next Kirk Ferentz took over at Iowa next year, could that person have the kind of career that Kirk Ferentz just did, with the standard being making the playoff? I just think it changes the perception on how we view programs, the longevity of how long coaches can stay, and eventually, unless you're winning at the top level for an extended period of time, people are going to ask for change. Like I just think it invites turnover to a degree maybe that we haven't seen in the sport.
And I think Nebraska's in for the long haul. And if you were going to ask me, Sam, do you think Nebraska will qualify for the playoff in the next 3 years? I would say yes. That would be my read. This year, I don't know. It's tricky this year. I think they're in some ways the roster could just use one. All those offensive and defensive linemen that we've talked about, that we've been seeing develop. It feels like once those guys are in their third and fourth years of development, they will be at peak form. And a lot of those guys are in their second and third year right now. And it feels almost a little too early.
So do you say they're making it based on where you think Nebraska's going, or because of an expanded playoff coming? Are you assuming that the access gets easier, or both?
I think a little bit of both. And I don't want to be overly positive, but I do feel like, again, part of my job, I'm paid to assess and interpret what I think is happening within the program. And I think what I would say is I like where they're at with the offensive coordinator. I think that issue got resolved. And then the physicality that they have is better than it has been since the Bo era. And I think their line development is good. It just, you kind of knew that last year they're going to have a bunch of senior linemen, but they're going to have a freshman quarterback, and the wide receiver unit wasn't quite what it needed to be. This year it's going to be a better receiver unit, and I think next year it's going to be even better. And then your lines will kind of grow up again. They're kind of hitting the reset button on the defensive line, and people are torn on whether they're going to be. What I've said on radio shows is until they show that they're better, I'm not going to sit here and knock anything Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher and Jamari Butler did. Those were 3 men who battled in the Big Ten. You're going to have to show me that not only the 3 guys that replaced them, but then the guys behind them. Because remember, the guys that backed up those 3 men last year were Elijah Judy and Cam Lenhart. Well, who's behind Judy and Lenhart this year? Well, they're not Cam Lenhart and Elijah Judy from last year. So like that's what I mean, is that I think that give it another year and I think it'll all be in place. And then my understanding is they feel real good about the transfers they signed
Mhm.
that are younger, like an Andrew Marshall. They think he's pretty good. So I think they're close this year, but I think, yeah, if you're going to hold me to it, I would say next year. And their schedule next year is harder. But the point being that I think it's not only where they're going, but yeah, the expansion helps. Sure. If you tell me there's four automatic spots and Nebraska needs to get in the top six and then play for one of the four, I buy that. I can buy that. You know, your top four right now are probably Penn State, Oregon, um, Ohio State, and then pick your fourth. I'd say it's Illinois this year. I think they're a better team this year than Michigan. I do.
Mm.
But, and then I would say USC. And then I would say Nebraska and Michigan are neck and neck. The Nebraska Michigan game is an important game for who's going to be that sixth place team. So is Nebraska Minnesota. Those are two huge games.
Mm-hmm.
Three very similar teams too. Nebraska probably has the best quarterback of the three. Michigan probably has the best lines. Minnesota probably has the most continuity on its coaching staff. They have a head coach that has a proven track record for game management. He's not perfect, but he knows how to win football games. And he damn near beat Michigan last year. Probably should have. Kind of got screwed on a call late, but he knows how to win games. And so those three teams are all kind of, for me, they're in a pod. And you could almost throw USC in there too. I feel like the top four is clear, and then you've got those teams, and Iowa could be in that little pod too. So there's any five of those teams could emerge as your fifth best team or sixth best team.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Whereas I think
Um,
next year Nebraska could be a top three team because Penn State's going to lose a lot. This is the year for Penn State. They need to win the national championship this year because next year they're going to have to reload a lot of the positions, and even when you reload, you're going to go down a little. Next year is Penn State's going to go down a little, but this, Nebraska could rise up. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just going to talk briefly, but too about the automatic qualifiers, like this idea that the SEC and the Big Ten are pushing for AQs. Like it seems unnecessary given the advantages they already have built in financially through television money and everything else. Like I think they'd get. I mean, we just saw it. They got four last year. I think they'd continue to get right around that many. So I suppose from Nebraska's perspective, sure that it's helpful. It's good. It gives you a benchmark, sort of like when in the old Big Ten West did. Like that was your starting point, and you built off of that. Uh, but I think that's going to be just fascinating to watch here. If the Big Ten and the SEC can throw their weight around and push that thing through, or if they can settle to have that system be based on merit. And I think based on merit would be good enough. I think that would do the trick for them anyway. Uh, but just the fact that that thing still isn't settled yet, I know is also reflective of where we are in college sports right now. There's still even talking about next season, there's still so much up in the air in terms of what the standard is and what people are trying to achieve.
Totally agree. We'll see what happens there. Long ways to the season, man. And it's a big one.
It's only mid-May.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.